Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Marty Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of Peerless, Volume 2, also known as Wu Shuang by Meng Xi Shi, and we're covering chapters 73 and 74. And then the next day we will get through the last 3 chapters. So I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 73. The Black Moon Shaman's passing was a great blow to the Western Cognate, but even this couldn't keep the 8 Tribes Conference from proceeding. The next morning, Cui Buqiu and the rest had just finished washing and changing when Jin Lian's maid, Mu Ge, brought their breakfast. Once they'd eaten, she explained, she'd take them to the conference. Cui Xianxiang, my mistress says if you wish to see the shaman's body, she will arrange it, said Mu Ge. But you must be quick. Last night, the second prince had accused Feng Xiao of murder, and not an hour later, Feng Xiao had appeared in his yurt. It wasn't difficult to connect the dots. Even if Jin Lian had been considerably more slow-witted than she was, she would have realized this was fishy. Besides, she'd personally witnessed Feng Xiao's martial arts. Ada having successfully ambushed Feng Xiao was about as likely as the sun rising in the west. She still suspected Feng Xiao had something to do with the death of the Black Moon Shaman, though Cui Buqiu had vociferously denied it. And it was true, they had no motive. Ada, on the other hand, was audacious and unscrupulous. It was absolutely possible he'd murdered the shaman himself and tried to pin the blame on Cui Buqiu's group. Jin Lian had witnessed Cui Buqiu's autopsy skills in Tianmo. She obviously hoped he could glean the cause of the Black Moon Shaman's death, but Cui Buqiu shook his head. In order to destroy the evidence, the murderer burned the body. I fear they'll have ensured there's nothing left to find. Even if I go, it won't do us any good. Mu Ge only had a hazy understanding of his meaning, but she'd passed the message to Jin Lian. Cui Buqiu and Feng Xiao partook of a gukturk breakfast, though the meal wasn't anything spectacular. Stomachs filled, they followed Mu Ge to the lake. Translated into Chinese, its name was Verdant Lake, so called for the lush green grasses that surrounded it. It was mid-morning when they arrived, followed closely by the second prince, surrounded by his retinue of attendants. Gone was his fuming rage of the previous night. He swept a cool glance over Cui Buqiu and Feng Xiao, malice tugging up the corner of his mouth. He'd undoubtedly hatched some new and nefarious plot. Fo'ar's gaze, too, lingered on Feng Xiao for a moment before moving ponderously away. He knows I'm injured, said Feng Xiao. A martial arts expert became a true master not merely through fighting prowess, but also razor-sharp perception and decisive judgment. When Feng Xiao boasted that he ranked within the top 10 or even 5 as a fighter, his confidence came from his strength, not overblown arrogance. Fo'ar had fought him twice and knew how formidable this man was, but the gap between them was small. Fo'ar likely also ranked in the top 10. Had Feng Xiao been uninjured, Fo'ar would have had to consider carefully before launching an attack. But after last night's fiasco, Fo'ar was sure Feng Xiao had been hurt, and that the wound wasn't a minor one. Otherwise, there'd have been no need to mask the smell of blood. Fo'ar would do whatever he could to force Feng Xiao onto the field today. This so-called conference wasn't the kind where everyone sat down for a friendly chat. The Gukturks were rough and straightforward. First, they used martial arts to decide the pecking order. If one won, they were deemed worthy of respect, and all discussions would go smoothly. But if one lost, if the Sui dynasty's envoy fell to a single strike, who would believe in the might of their emperor? He's guaranteed to request a one-on-one match with you, said Cui Buqiu. So he can kill me in front of everyone, said Feng Xiao. Cui Buqiu nodded. Disposing of Feng Xiao was a sure way to intimidate everyone present. A lazy smile spread over Feng Xiao's face. Goodness, I'm so scared. They spoke no more of it. Apakagan had arrived to begin the conference. As attendants placed fine wines and exquisite delicacies before all the guests, Apakagan raised his glass, thanking the envoys for coming from afar. He raised a cup of wine to the Sui dynasty and another to Ishbara Kagan, honoring both Cuibuchu and Foar with a flood of courteous words. When this Gokturk Kagan wasn't losing himself in lustful pleasantries, Cuibuchu mused, his mind was quite clear. Ishbara practiced an aggressive brand of diplomacy. He'd sent Foar to intimidate Apakagan into allying with him, though he must also have offered tempting benefits. Foar had beaten them to Suyab by several days, which was why they had faced such a cold welcome. But when Apakagan had seen the people of the Sui dynasty were not to be trifled with, he'd backtracked and treated them with courtesy. After the Black Moon Shaman's death last night, he hadn't accused them. Instead, he'd de-escalated the situation, allowing Cuibuchu's party a peaceful night's rest. As Cuibuchu's mind wandered, Apakagan continued addressing the envoys, his smile bright and amiable. It seemed he'd had a pleasant night. The Black Moon Shaman's murder had no effect on his enjoyment of his new concubine. He clapped his hands, and several Gokturk warriors came forward, brandishing curved sabers. Unlike the graceful dance of the Kuchean woman the previous night, today's performance was a sword dance, a display of masculine vigor. This style had evolved on the battlefield where real blades and spears glinted with killing intent, and this dance was likewise full of murderous energy. The warriors moved in unison, leaping and somersaulting through the air. It was powerful in its simplicity, a spectacular sight. But few people were in the mood to appreciate the dance. Most were concerned about the upcoming contest of strength. The envoys of the smaller western region's nations wondered how to stand out, while the lesser Gokturk tribes agonized over how to avoid annexation. The second prince contemplated how to make Cuibuchu and his companions suffer, while the first prince recalled his burst of courage last night and how he'd opposed his younger brother. He stirred restlessly with excitement, hoping for the chance to give his arrogant sibling another kick. Through it all, Apakagan held his Kuchean beauty in his lap, laughing and whispering in her ear, watching the saber dance with no concern for anyone else's plans. As for Foar, he eyed Feng Xiao from the other side of the dancing warriors, and his lips curved in a meaningful smile. You can't hide your injury from me. We were evenly matched in the past, but you'll die here today. When the sword dance was over and the warriors dispersed, Ada seized his opportunity. He rose and swept his gaze over the crowd, his expression haughty and satisfied. Father, our conferences usually begin with the standard martial arts contest, but we have quite a few special guests this year. We should change the rules, otherwise it would be disrespectful to them. Jinlian saw at once where he was going. Kagan, the conference's martial competitions are an honored tradition here in Suyab. If anything, it would be disrespectful to alter them. Apakagan raised a hand to silence her. What kind of changes? He asked with interest. Ada shot Jinlian a gleeful look. In the past, the competition started with a horseback archery contest, and the winner scored based on distance and accuracy. But Foar is a preeminent martial artist across both the eastern and western cognate. Such a contest is an insult to his skills. Instead, let's try this. Have one person ride while holding an apple, and the archer remain on the ground. The archer must maintain a distance of 100 paces, and whoever hits the fruit will be the victor. Murmurs of surprise rose from the crowd. The ancient practice of hitting a poplar leaf at 100 paces was sufficient to deem one a master archer. Now the target would be in motion, and not even at a constant speed. Someone had to carry it in their hand, jostled up and down as they rode. Missing the fruit was the least of their worries. If the arrow hit the rider instead... Ada was proposing using human targets. Oh God. He'd made up his mind last night. Neither Feng Xiao nor Cui Bichu would slip from his grasp. He wouldn't let the archers use some random slaves to carry fruit for them. Both archers and target bearers must be of suitable status. They cannot be replaced with slaves and servants. Foar clapped his hands. A wonderful idea from the second prince. Allow me to do the opening honors. Before Apakagan or Cui Bichu could object, he instructed his deputy envoy to take the apple, mount a horse, and gallop ahead. The horse cantered over 100 paces away before wheeling around and galloping back. Only then did Foar raise his bow. He pulled the bowstring a full draw, infused the bow and arrow with internal energy, and let it fly. Everyone squinted, watching the arrow streak toward its mark. No ordinary marksman could hit such a target at this distance. They'd need to consider the trajectory of the arrow, and besides, Foar's bow had a maximum range of 100 paces. But after the infusion of internal energy, the arrow didn't fall or even slow past 100 paces. It flew straight until it pierced the apple in the deputy envoy's hand, clean through. Thunderous cheers exploded as the crowd burst into applause. Regardless of whether they were Ishbara's enemies or allies, Foar's shot was impeccable. Strength was worthy of respect. Foar lowered his bow, then looked at Feng Xiao and smiled. He had it all figured out. Of their party of 3, Cui Bichu knew not a speck of martial arts, let alone archery. Qiao Xian was a respectable martial artist, but not necessarily a good marksman. This was a skill that required keen sight. If anyone could do it, armies wouldn't need dedicated archers. Even if Qiao Xian could draw a bow, there was no way she could hit a target as small as an apple from 100 paces. And if their performance was in any way inferior to Foar's, they'd lose. The sight of an archery contest seemed a small thing, but it was not only the Sui dynasty's reputation in the various nations of the western regions at stake. Cui Bichu risked losing Apakagan's respect when it came time to pick his allies. If they didn't want to lose, Feng Xiao had to compete. Yet that, too, was to Foar's advantage. Feng Xiao was injured. Drawing the bow would aggravate his wound. Even if Feng Xiao won the first match, he was sure to lose the second. Foar smiled broadly. What will you do? It's your loss either way. Cui Bichu knitted his brows, as if he were also worried. He turned to murmur something to Feng Xiao, who looked dissatisfied. After a hushed debate, they both fell silent. Foar watched their quiet dispute, a disagreement before the battle. Hearts divided. It only increased their chances of losing. The thought brought him immense pleasure. Ada fanned the flames. Are you afraid, envoys of the Sui dynasty? I can hardly blame you. You're no match for Foar, the strongest Gukturk martial artist. Admit defeat now and forget any alliance. I'll plead with my father to gift you some cattle and sheep so you won't embarrass yourselves too greatly when you return to the Central Plains. Foar and Ada weren't allies. In truth, they shared no relationship whatsoever. But today, Foar had found this second prince coarse and infuriating, inferior to Ishbara Kagan in every way. With such an heir, the Western Khaganate would never be powerful. But now they shared a common enemy. Foar didn't need to say a word for Ada to start hopping about of his own volition. Suddenly, Foar found this prince much less infuriating. Chapter 74. Cui Bichu finally spoke up. In that case, Qiao Xian will shoot. I will hold the apple. You cannot, interrupted Ada. That woman is your servant. Archers and target bearers must be of the appropriate status. They cannot be replaced with slaves and servants. Can a woman represent your Sui dynasty? Qiao Xian is not my servant, said Cui Bichu coolly. She holds a high position within the Zuoya Bureau and is an official of the imperial court. The Eastern Khaganate sent their chief envoy to shoot while his deputy held the apple. Ada changed tack. That woman doesn't hold a rank equivalent to the Eastern Khaganate's deputy envoy. You may choose her, but her inferior status will be taken into account in the judging. He looked to Apakagan. Father, what do you say? This... The Kakan stroked his beard and hesitated, but didn't disagree. Ade was elated. Do you insist on sending that woman to shoot? He asked Suibichu. Suibichu frowned and glanced toward Feng Xiao, who slowly stood up. I'll do it. The second prince looked like a cat that had gotten into the cream. His plan had succeeded. Fo'ar watched as Feng Xiao raised his bow and nocked the arrow. He waited until Cuibichu was galloping toward him at full speed, then let it fly. The arrow whistled through the air and struck the apple. The distance between Cuibichu and Feng Xiao was almost exactly the same as Fo'ar's shot. Jinlian fretted in silence, afraid Apakagan might show bias. But this time, the Kagan was fair. Both our honored guests are equally outstanding archers. Ade hadn't expected Suibichu to comply so readily. He snorted coldly. Yet Fo'ar, though he made no move or sound, was deeply pleased. Regardless of where Feng Xiao's wound was located, Fo'ar was certain that draw had aggravated it. Feng Xiao lowered the bow and cupped his hands at Apakagan, then returned to his seat. His movements were free and graceful. There was no sign of discomfort. But Fo'ar noticed a stiffness to his right shoulder when he turned, the motion the slightest bit unnatural. Such details might escape others, but they didn't escape Fo'ar, who'd watched him closely since the moment he stood. By now the sun had climbed in the sky, and the foot of Mount Sanmi was broiling. Most of the assembled guests wore light and breezy attire, but peeking out of Feng Xiao's collar was a white cotton top, with a thick outer robe layered over. This wasn't because Feng Xiao feared the cold. His shoulder must be bandaged, and the additional layers were to conceal that his left and right shoulders weren't level. So it was his right shoulder that was injured. Fo'ar's lips curved. Fo'ar and Feng Xiao's spectacular showings had elicited thunderous applause from the remaining envoys, but with it came a creeping sense of inferiority. Those who still insisted on competing either fell short of the required distance, failed to hit the mark dead on, or missed completely. A few unfortunates managed to shoot the horse instead, almost crushing the rider. After that, no one dared to try again, and the first contest of the conference ended in a draw. Yet having failed to embarrass the Central Plainsman, the second prince was far from satisfied. He set out to make more trouble. Father, the first contest ended too quickly today. We can't let the same happen with the second. Apakaga nodded. What do you propose? The martial arts of the Sui envoy's maid left a deep impression on me yesterday, said Ade. At the words deep impression, he gritted his teeth. His smile turned savage. My own subordinate, Namudo, wishes for a match, so he may learn from her skills. The Kagan looked toward Suibichu. What do you say, honored guest? Who is Namudo? Asked Suibichu. A middle-aged Gokturk man had stood silently behind the second prince. Now he took a step forward and saluted Suibichu in the Gokturk manner. Despite being Ade's man, he had none of his master's brash aura. Suibichu didn't need Feng Xiao to tell him this was a top-notch martial artist. Can you win? Suibichu asked Qiao Xian in a whisper. I haven't seen him in action, said Qiao Xian. He wasn't at the second prince's side yesterday. But look how calm he is. He must be strong. This subordinate is willing to try. Suibichu read between the lines. Had this man been present yesterday, Qiao Xian might not have been able to step on the second prince's head the way she had. Many looked incredulous as they watched the delicate-looking Qiao Xian step gracefully out. Only a few had witnessed the scene in the royal yurt the day before, when Qiao Xian had crushed the second prince into the floor. How could this young, beautiful woman be a match for a Gokturk warrior like Namudo? Before anyone could wonder further, Namudo threw the first punch. A single glance revealed the power behind that blow. His was a style that valued sweeping movements and brute force. Qiao Xian was slender, her footwork swift and agile, a complete contrast to Namudo. Yet she didn't shrink in the face of his heavy blows. Two silhouettes clashed, one gray and one white. The first was as fierce and vigorous as a tiger, his every punch capable of collapsing mountains and shattering earth as it whistled through the air. The second was weightless as a dragon cutting through water, her sword glare weaving through the wind from his fists, a wicked killing intent cloaked behind an ethereal exterior. If her opponent was even a little deceived, even slightly careless, they'd find themselves at her mercy. Namudo should have looked down on an opponent like Qiao Xian, but he didn't. He brought his full focus to fighting her and ignored all else. "How does he compare to Qiao Xian?" Tribuchu asked. "In time, he might become a second Fo'ar," came Feng Xiao's answer. Tribuchu frowned. To progress along the path of martial arts required hard work, but talent was also a significant factor. Feng Xiao's natural talent was extraordinary. Fo'ars, too, went without saying. No matter how hard they worked, someone without talent would never become a peerless expert, let alone a martial arts grandmaster. If Feng Xiao said Namudo could grow to rival Fo'ar, he had recognized Namudo's gifts. What was more, Namudo showed neither arrogance nor contempt when facing a woman like Qiao Xian. In this regard, he showed better judgment than Fo'ar. Against this opponent, Qiao Xian would find it difficult to emerge victorious. The world teemed with talented people. There was always a taller mountain, always a higher sky, always another better than oneself. Considering the size of the Khaganate, Fo'ar couldn't be the only expert. While he'd monopolized their attention, Namudo had popped up. "It will be hard for Qiao Xian to win," said Feng Xiao. If Feng Xiao could see this, Fo'ar could as well. He watched as one figure flipped and whirled upon the field, while the other stood stolid as a mountain. He smiled. Adu, however, remained anxious. He was a mediocre fighter and couldn't tell who was the stronger of the two. Like many amateur spectators, he felt Namudo's slow, steady strikes were inferior to the quick and graceful flow of Qiao Xian's form. "What are you smiling for?" the second prince snarled, glimpsing Fo'ar's expression out of the corner of his eye. Fo'ar was unprovoked. He answered good-naturedly. "I'm merely happy for you, second prince." Ado scowled. "What's there to be happy about?" "Namudo's victory is nigh." "You mean Namudo can defeat that woman?" the prince asked, taken aback. "The Central Plains woman has superior Qinggong," said Fo'ar, "but she will eventually exhaust her stamina. Namudo has abundant internal energy, and his fist techniques, though simple, are powerful. There is a saying in the Central Plains, 'The truly artful are crude in appearance.'" At that moment, Namudo struck Qiao Xian hard in the stomach. She froze and stumbled back a few steps, barely managing to recover her balance. Namudo seized his advantage and closed in, leaping up to kick the sword from her hand. He spun in the air, and his foot slammed into Qiao Xian's waist. Qiao Xian blanched and struck out with a palm. Namudo had jumped back, but a line of bright crimson trickled from the corner of Qiao Xian's mouth. She'd suffered an internal injury. "Stop!" Tribuchu rose swiftly from his seat. "We concede. Stop the fight." Gratified, Ada urged Namudo. "Don't stop! Keep fighting!" Namudo didn't move. "She's conceded the bout." "Who's your master?" Ada roared. "I want that woman dead!" "Kagan!" Jilian yelled, unable to watch any longer. "Ada, sit down," barked Appa Kagan. "Father!" Ada complained. "The Central Plains sent a woman as an envoy. This is an insult to us. On top of that, this woman laid her hands on me yesterday. Would publicly losing her life in a martial arts contest not be fair payback?" "This is the 8 Tribes Conference, not a venue for your personal revenge," said Appa Kagan coldly. "If I tell you to sit down, then sit." Qiao Xian slowly made her way back to Cui Buchu's side. "How is it?" Cui Buchu asked in concern. Qiao Xian shook her head. She was fine. Within the Jianghu, Qiao Xian was considered a second-tier martial artist. Losing to Namato wasn't unexpected. Before she'd entered the arena, Feng Xiao, Cui Buchu, and even Qiao Xian herself had anticipated this outcome. Cui Buchu's expression was one of faint anger and suppressed panic. It seemed to confirm all Fo'ar's speculations about Feng Xiao. These three were cornered. They'd hoped to steal the spotlight today, yet instead they'd suffer defeat. But the final blow had yet to be struck. It was time for Fo'ar himself to step in. Fo'ar calmly got to his feet. He gazed at Feng Xiao from afar and raised his voice. "I wish to challenge Feng Longjuan to a match." He narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing Feng Xiao. Fo'ar had failed to defeat him twice in their previous encounters. Today, before the eyes of the crowd, he would kill Feng Xiao openly and honorably, but not before making him accept Fo'ar as his better. So focused was Fo'ar on Feng Xiao, he missed that Cui Buchu had spoken, but Feng Xiao heard him. "I had Qiao Xian go to great pains to create this opportunity. Please don't waste it, Deputy Chief Feng." Feng Xiao smiled. Would he really be so harsh on an injured man? Cui Buchu said nothing more, but every line of his face, down to the set of his brows and the flutter of his lashes, said the same thing. Yes, I would. All right, you guys, so that is it for now. And okay, let's go ahead and discuss these two short chapters really quickly. I'm so sorry that I'm not able to do more for you guys. I'm feeling better per se, but just like the energy levels they're off. Like, I didn't even get to read yesterday because I had no energy. To my surprise, I woke up with a little bit of gusto to read this right before it was time to publish it. But anyway, let me go over my notes. So the first thing that I want to say is I want to talk about Qiao Xian and her fight. Since that was the latest thing, then I'll start from the top of my notes. Qiao Xian is a formidable woman, and I respect her for going into a battle that she wasn't certain of victory. You know, some people, when they can see, like, I'm probably not going to win, they wouldn't even try at all. They just go ahead and concede. But, and there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, if you know you're going to lose, I see nothing wrong with admitting defeat before you even begin. But I do think that there is something quite honorable in her still going to stand up and fight against this person. And of course, we know it's not just for like honor and dignity. Like, they're here on a mission for their Sui dynasty. So I get it. But I still have a deep respect for her in that moment. And of course, I'm glad Cui Buchu, called it off like, hey, we concede. Like, he didn't think a moment. It was just like, nope, we're good. Which, of course, I mean, you could think, oh, well, if he didn't do that, she would be dead. And then that's one less person to defend him. Which I don't think that was a thought in his mind, though. I think he was purely thinking about Xiao Xian and not wanting her to be injured more, or worse, killed. Now, with that being said, I have to say that Ada is truly, he's immature is what he is, because I mean, during this entire event, he's just been so childish, and even him wanting Namuto to kill Qiao Xian was a childish thing, because like his father said, like, this is just a regular event and you're literally just trying to get revenge on her. It would have been one thing if the fight kept going and then she lost her life, but Cui Buchu already spoke up and said, we concede. So that's basically saying, hey, we don't want to fight to the death. So Appa Kagan was honoring that. I appreciate that. But also, just like Ada, interfering with how the normal plan usually goes, you can tell he's just poking the bear, basically, or he's just egging things where they don't need to be egged. For instance, saying, "Oh, the first match went too fast. Let's make sure the second one doesn't." Like, that just sounds like a lame thing to say. Like, what do you mean? If it happened fast, that's because, first off, it's what you chose for them to do. Did you expect it to take a long time? Like, if the people are good at what they do and then they manage to finish, they just manage to finish. You're literally just making up anything because you want to see this envoy fall. And then I really have a strong disliking for his character. I didn't like him in the first place, but I really, really don't like him now. And that's just because of, which, don't get me wrong, I totally understand it. It makes perfect sense. But knowing the kind of person that he is, I did not like him wanting to do the whole human target things like modao zushi and having the person hold the apple for the arrow to be shot at. Now, granted, like I said, I get that that's a thing and everyone else was perfectly fine with it. And in other circumstances, maybe I would have been fine with it. But because of his malicious intent, I was not fine with it. Also, the other thing I wanted to say, since Namuto was not at the event yesterday, I'm wondering if, which I may be wrong, if he was the person that caught Feng Xiao in the illusions or whatever. Like, I feel like fighting the martial arts and the illusions that people are able to cast, those may be in separate realms. So what if this person maybe is not as strong as full artist yet when it comes to fighting, but has great ability in creating illusions? Nevertheless, I'm just trying to figure out who killed the Black Moon Shaman, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, the last thing, was at the beginning of chapter 73, on the first page of it, actually, when they were talking about if people really think about Feng Xiao and his being captured by Adu whole storyline from yesterday, it didn't really make sense. And it said, hold on, let me go back there specifically. Sorry. It said that, besides, she'd personally, Jinlian, witnessed Feng Xiao's martial arts. Ada having successfully ambushed Feng Xiao was about as likely as the sun rising in the west. So, this is actually a common expression in Mandarin, and I wanted to share it with you all. It was something that I learned pretty early on when I was studying the language, and I just loved it so much. Although I pretty much love everything about the Mandarin language. So anyway, I'm going to say it once and then break it down and then say it again. So the expression the sun rising or coming out from the west is 太阳从西边出来. And sometimes I hear people put le at the end, which just makes it past tense. So 太阳从西边出来了. So 太阳 is the sun. 太 for tone, yang second tone, and then 从 is second tone, and it means from, from. Then we have 西边, which is the west, basically, and then 出, which is to go, and 来 is to come, so go come, so come out. So 太阳从西边出来了, if you want to add that in the in the end. So yes, the sun is rising from the west, or the sun rose from the west. Just a way to say something is unbelievable, damn near impossible. 太阳从西边出来了. All right, that is all for now. Depending on how I feel today, I may be able to record the rest of the chapters because it's literally like maybe 30 something pages. Let me see. 26 pages, I think. If I can, I'll go ahead and upload that later today, but if not, of course, then you'll just have it tomorrow and then we'll be done with volume 2. And I plan on resting as much as I can over the weekend. I still have work and school and stuff, so we'll see. But but hopefully I'll be back to normal so that next week when we start up, I can start reading, an hour's worth of content. But we shall see. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. 我爱你们。